Hello and welcome back. This is our third part of our lecture series on biosocial and contemporary perspectives based upon the textbook Criminology, 3rd edition by Frank Smaliger, Pearson Publications. In this section, this is our wrap-up, we're going to talk about the policy implications of the theories that we've been talking about. In other words, once we know about these kind of things, what do we do? What laws can we pass? What kind of programs can we do in our society to assist, to alleviate some of the issues that might lead to crime? Like, let's say an example, if you have clearly identified that poor nutrition and lack of proper vitamins and too much sugar in your diet and those types of things tend to lead to crime, if, of course, impacted by other things. Is there something our society can do to make sure that our kids, especially in poverty-stricken areas, are getting the proper diet? And some of those programs have existed for years. You know, you have the free lunch programs in the schools, assisted programs where people under a certain income class can get, in some cases, free breakfast and lunch. But what about dinner? You know, the kids are getting meals in a school. They're getting maybe getting good nutrition while they're in school, and then they go home, and who knows what they're getting. Of course, that's a social program that some folks would say, "Hey, why are we pouring all this money into these social programs? It costs us an awful lot." Thing is, if we find out through this science that there's a clear link between these issues and crime, wouldn't it be beneficial to our society if we figured out how to eliminate those problems? Granted, if we could, at some point, you know, if everybody had a job and everybody was able to make the same amount, not the same amount, but amount of money to support themselves to the way they like to be supported, maybe they can, you know, have their own nutrition issues. But right now, there's a whole lot of people out there that are suffering, and that's just one issue. So that's what we want to talk about right now is the policy implications. You know, what kind of things are we going to, as one student suggested last night in class, do a full psychological evaluation of every single person that comes into the prison system. And the other side of that coin is, how much money is that going to cost to have an entire psychological evaluation? Are we going to have an MRI or a brain scan of people coming into our prison systems to see if they have any of these deficiencies that are noted by people like Professor Rain and others who talk about these brain dysfunctions and the prefrontal cortex issues? You know, knowing this information and knowing how it may impact crime, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to do, now, once we have the human genome mapped and we know what genes contribute to what behaviors, do we then do a study of every single person to find out what they have, to genetic testing? I know, I have a niece who has cystic fibrosis, and many years ago, we did genetic testing, my wife and I, to determine whether we carried the same genes so that we would know whether our own child could potentially have that disease. And we found out, no, we didn't, but that testing was available. As we get more and more into the science with the Genome Project, we can find out more and more about people either before you even think about having kids or after you have kids. And what are we going to do with that information? Are we going to start manipulating genes so we can have the kid that we want? Or after one's born, can we manipulate so they change? Now, those are some really ethical questions that are going to be asked later on too, as we find out more about the scientific background and aspects and how that impact goes on. The next thing we're going to talk about are critiques. You know, what have other scientists or criminologists or other people found as fault with these biosocial perspectives? And lastly is a chapter review, which basically just goes real quickly over all the concepts that we've discussed, and then a brief closing on my part. So let's take a look. All right, so again, objective 4.6 is policy implications of modern biological theories of crime. We know that Many genes may affect the brain functioning in ways that either increase or reduce changes of individual learning and various complex behavior patterns, including those so offensive to others that criminal sanctions have been instituted to minimize their recurrence. Well, we talked previously, when we were talking about classical and neoclassical theory, about the importance of deterrence, or as you know, the use of sanctions, as they say here, criminal sanctions, putting somebody in prison, put them on probation, whatever, as trying to minimize recidivism, you know, the recurrence of crime, reoffending. Of course, now we're going to find out that if there's something in our genes that's affecting the behavior, if that's what's causing the behavior, or if that's what's contributing to behavior, are we really going to change that behavior by a prison sentence? You know, that's one of the policy implications. What we're doing working, or is there something else that we need to do based upon the science that's coming out? That was it in a nutshell. Critiques. Many perspectives of biological and biosocial approaches criticized because they fail to accurately predict criminality while saying they understand its causes. And that's absolutely true. You know, you can say, okay, well, prefrontal cortex, well, you know, this particular gene, that particular gene, Twinkies. You can say that they contribute to criminality, but you can't really predict it. And unfortunately, a lot of people, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, where's that science that's going to tell me that that baby, when it's born, is going to be a criminal and we need to do something about it? We're not to that level yet. Will we ever be to that level? I think what we've found so far is there are so many contributing factors that interplay into this problem that it may be very difficult to have that predictability. These theories are also criticized because sometimes there's issues with the studies, methodological problems. I actually just read an article, it's in today's Washington Post, about studies of a doctor for the last 25 years has been doing studies on the brain and speech. Now, it has little to do with criminology, but it talks about this methodological issue. And the organization he was doing the studies from is now saying that none of that information can be used because they found that there was record-keeping problems and other issues within the studies. And that's some of the critiques of these biosocial theories, is that there are methodological issues, that maybe the study wasn't done completely in accordance with the scientific method. Biosocial theories fail to explain regional and temporal variations in crime rate. You know, we can say this gene, that gene, this issue, that issue, but why in some parts of the country is there more crime than in other parts of the country? Why, you know, in the South, where it's hotter, do we have more crime? And you could go from there and say, well, maybe the impact of the temperate issues or temporal issues contribute to that factor. But then when you look at, say, some tropical island where, yeah, it's hot, but it's nice and breezy, and they don't have the same crime level as you might have in, say, Mississippi. Not to bash Mississippi, but again, they say, you can't explain it. How come? You also have issues that, you know, biological theories that focus on environmental, mental, and chemical issues can explain why certain kinds of crimes are more likely to occur in certain areas and specific subcultures and not others. Now, as another one of those things where, okay, you say that this environmental issue contributes to crime and this chemical contributes to crime, but how come it occurs here and not in this other geographic area that might have the same thing? And again, you have to go back to the interplay, but that's the critique. And saying, well, you're saying this is what happens, but there's other places where it doesn't happen, but they got the same problem. Also not accounting for changes in crime rates over time, because the issues may still exist, but for some reason the crime rates are going up and down. So what was it? Now, when we look at social issues, you know, when there's a crime drop, you know, every mayor, every police chief around the country likes to say, well, this is what we did and this is why it happened. But is that truly the reason? Is the reason that there was a tremendous drop in crime during World War II? Did it have anything to do with things that people were doing at home, or did it have to do with what we said in the beginning of the course, that most of your criminal age males had left the country, or not most, but a good number of them had left the country to fight in the war? Another critique is some biosocial criminologists have been accused of racial and class bias because they couldn't explain why disproportionate numbers of certain types of crime are committed by poor people and by racial and ethnic minorities. So you're saying, hey, you guys are racist or you're biased against class because you're not able to suggest why more people of color, if you will, or more people of this race or that race commit these types of crimes. Why can't you explain that? Again, I think the expectation is too high, that we're saying, oh well, we want to try to pin it on one thing, and that is not possible. I think this chapter really did a good job of talking about the fact that there's an interplay. Biosocial theories, we're not talking about just the fact that there might be some genetic issue or just the fact that you got this hyperglycemia. We're talking about that factor coupled with multiple other factors. Human genome. All right, so we're in the chapter summary. So we finished the critiques. We know what people say, and basically it boils down to that people are unhappy because you guys are putting this theory on, but it doesn't nail everything down. And as we have seen so far, and we will see in the weeks to come, that none of these theories nails it down. And that is why criminology is interdisciplinary. That's why it is considered an integrated science, because what we really have going on here is not a single factor that creates crime or criminality, but a multitude of factors that interact with each other that then lead to these issues. So we talked about in the beginning of this particular chapter in video number 1, the Human Genome Project. Again, if you didn't watch the 2 videos that I posted, look at it, because that's going to tell us, we're learning a great deal about human behavior and our human makeup, disease processes, all kinds of things through this Human Genome Project. Study of genetics, again, is looking at that model of gene-environment interaction and employs the idea of heritability to help explain law-violating behavior. So again, we're not saying that necessarily that a whole family like the Jukes is going to be criminal, but we do acknowledge that there are genetic issues that could be passed down from family to family, or from one generation to the next generation, that may predispose people to certain types of behavior. Of course, one of the issues, and it wasn't mentioned in the critiques, is the heritability idea. If you go too far with it, kind of gets us back where we talked about last week of the idea of eugenics. If in eugenic criminology, if we're, somebody really pushes that there is a crime gene, well, what do we do about that crime gene? Do we put all those people on an island somewhere where they can't interact with the rest of the world? Do we kill them all, as Hitler tried to do with the Jews? Do we put them all in prison, as some people say that we're trying to do with African Americans by mass incarceration? What do we do if there really is a scientific evidence of a gene that contributes to crime? Again, I don't think that's what was going to happen, because it's an interplay. But some people fear that if the science goes too far, as it did in the 1920s, that people might be trying to identify criminal people and criminal groups and say, hey, maybe these people shouldn't be in our society. And that would definitely be a bad thing. Brain dysfunction. We talked about brain dysfunction and how physical changes in a certain part of the brain might cause criminality. Again, we talked about Michael and his brain tumor that then somehow encouraged him to be a sex offender. We talked a little bit about Phineas Gage, who was referenced in Adrian Rain's book, and how his behavior totally changed after having a spike go through his head, even though he survived. We talked about another gentleman in London who tried to kill himself and didn't radically change his behavior, but mainly because, you know, he had a very supportive family. So brain dysfunction, we looked a little bit about that. We've also looked at body chemistry, about what goes into your body, whether it's your nutrition, your vitamin deficiency, other conditions, and how that might affect your behavior. Biosocial criminology, we looked at the interaction between biology and the physical and social environments as key to understanding human behavior, including criminality. So, you know, that's probably the key. You know, we see these biological issues, we see psychiatric issues, which we'll study in the coming week. But there's an interplay between those and the social environment that the people are in. A contemporary crime prevention program needs to be based on modern understandings of the link between biology and crime. You know, what can we do with that information, the biological information that's going to help us to prevent crime? Understanding that, you know, that's part of it. Can we provide people, make sure that we provide that support to people that might have a brain issue so that they're not going down the wrong path? Unfortunately, biological criminology has suffered from having a lack of a workable definition of criminality. So they need to work on that, obviously, to move forward. And let me get out of here. That was the last slide on the slide deck, number 49. So again, you know, we have a lot of stuff going on within the biological issues. Last week we talked about, you know, contemporary biological issues. And today we're talking about some of those biological issues. We're talking about various other things going on in the body. We talked about genetics and brain dysfunction and a whole host of things that I'm not going to go and repeat them all right now. But remember that there is a significant amount of interplay between what goes on in the body and what goes on in the environment. And I think what we'll see throughout the entire course is no matter what goes on in any of those venues, that they each interact with each other. And there's no way that we can label one thing, just one thing, as being the cause of crime. So I hope you enjoyed these 3 relatively short videos today. Let me know. You can actually respond at the bottom of the video segments and give me your comments, criticisms, witticisms, whatever. Let me know what you think. I know 2 of the students in class this week who watched last week's chunked videos were very pleased. It's much easier to sit and maybe watch one for 15 minutes than it is to watch me for an hour and a half, I know. Of course, you know, the ones that are that long, you can always stop them and go back to them later. And because they're all posted on YouTube, if you were in the middle of watching them and you're logged in and signed in, when you go back to watch it again, it should start where you left off. So kind of same thing. You find a breaking point, you stop, and you say, okay, I'm going to come back and do this later. But obviously, it's easier when it's done this way. So have a wonderful day.